The warning lights flashed red across the control panel. Dr. Taiwan Park's hands moved quickly over the screens as he tried to keep his escape pod steady. Above him, through the small window, he could see his research ship breaking apart in the violent solar storm. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Pod 7 from the Horizon Dawn," he said into his radio. Only static answered him. The storm was too strong for any signals to get through. Taiwan checked his navigation screen. The nearest planet was K317, an unexplored world with breathable air. It wasn't ideal, but he had no choice. His pod was losing power fast. The planet grew larger in his window. It was beautiful, with vast green-violet forests and 2 moons hanging in its pink sky. Under different circumstances, Taiwan would have been excited to study such a world. As a xenobiologist, someone who studies alien life, this was the kind of planet he had always dreamed of visiting. But not like this. Not in a damaged escape pod with no way to call for help. The pod started to shake as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Warning messages popped up faster than Taiwan could read them. He gripped his seat tightly and tried to keep the pod's nose up. If he came in too steep, he would burn up. Too shallow, and he would bounce off the atmosphere into space. "Come on," he whispered to himself. "Just a little longer." Trees rushed past beneath him, their violet leaves blurring together. He was coming in too fast. Taiwan pulled up with all his strength, but the pod's controls were sluggish. A mountain appeared ahead of him. No, no, no. He turned hard to the right. The pod screamed in protest. For a moment, he thought he would make it. Then the left wing clipped a massive tree. The pod spun wildly. Taiwan saw sky, ground, sky, ground. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. His head slammed against the side of the cockpit. Everything went black. When Taiwan opened his eyes, smoke filled the pod. His head throbbed, and a sharp pain shot through his right leg. Sunlight streamed through a crack in the roof. How long had he been unconscious? He tried to move and gasped at the pain. Looking down, he saw his leg was trapped under a fallen piece of equipment. It took him several minutes of pushing and pulling to get free. His leg wasn't broken, but it was badly cut and bruised. Taiwan grabbed the emergency medical kit from under his seat. He cleaned and bandaged his leg as best he could. It would have to do for now. The pod's radio was dead. So were most of the other systems. The emergency beacon was working, but its range was limited. Even if someone picked up its signal, it could take days or weeks for help to arrive. He needed to assess his situation. The air was breathable, according to his handheld scanner. That was good news. He had enough emergency rations for 2 weeks if he was careful. The pod's water recycler still worked, so he wouldn't die of thirst. His biggest problems were his injured leg and the fact that no one knew exactly where he was. Taiwan pulled himself up to look out the broken window. The forest around him was unlike anything he had ever seen. The trees had smooth, silver-white bark and leaves in shades of violet and indigo. Strange bird-like creatures with 4 wings soared between the branches. In the distance, something large moved through the trees, but it was too far away to see clearly. He checked his scanner again. The reading showed complex life forms in all directions. As a scientist, he was fascinated. As a stranded crash survivor, he was worried. Where there was complex life, there were usually predators. Night would come soon. He needed to secure the pod and take inventory of his supplies. Tomorrow, he could try to salvage more from the wreckage and maybe set up some kind of shelter. For now, he had to focus on surviving. What Taiwan didn't notice was the set of unusual tracks in the soil near his pod, or the eyes watching him from the deepening shadows of the alien forest. He wasn't alone on this strange world, and soon he would discover just how not alone he really was. Morning came with strange sounds. Taiwan woke up to calls and cries he had never heard before. His leg hurt less, but moving was still difficult. He needed to check the crash site for anything useful. The pod's door was stuck. Tai-1 had to push hard to open it, and the metal made a loud screech. As soon as he stepped outside, all the forest sounds stopped. The silence was sudden and complete. "That's not good," he said to himself. On Earth, when animals went quiet, it usually meant a predator was near. Tai-1 pulled out his scanner and checked the area. The readings showed several large life forms moving away from his crash site. Whatever had been nearby was leaving. He wasn't sure if that was good or bad news. The morning air was cool and smelled like mint and rain. Tai-1 limped around his pod, making a list of what he could salvage. The communication system was beyond repair. Most of the navigation equipment was destroyed. But he found some useful things: tools, more medical supplies, and a portable solar charger for his devices. As he worked, he noticed something odd. There were marks in the dirt around the pod, tracks unlike any he had seen in his years of studying alien life. They looked like wolf prints, but bigger and with a strange pattern. Instead of 4 toes, these had 6, arranged in a circle. Tai-1 took pictures with his datapad and made notes. Even in danger, he couldn't stop being a scientist. These tracks could be important. They might tell him what kind of creatures he needed to watch out for. He was examining a particularly clear print when he saw movement in the corner of his eye. Something had darted between the trees. Something big. Tai-1 straightened up slowly. His heart beat faster. He tried to remember what he'd learned about encountering wild animals. Don't run. Don't show fear. Make yourself look big. But these weren't Earth animals. He had no idea if those rules would help here. More movement caught his attention, this time on his left. Then behind him. Whatever was out there, there was more than one. They were smart enough to surround him. Tai-1 backed up until he felt the pod's metal wall behind him. His injured leg trembled from standing too long. He held his scanner up, trying to count the life signs around him. The readings showed 8 large creatures moving in a circle around his position. They were coordinating their movements. That meant intelligence. A branch snapped nearby. Tai-1 turned toward the sound, and for the first time, he got a clear look at what was hunting him. Through the violet leaves, a pair of eyes glowed with their own light. They were silver blue, like stars in the evening sky. As he watched, more eyes appeared. They blinked in sequence, passing some kind of signal between them. Then one of the creatures stepped into full view. Tai-1's breath caught in his throat. It looked like a wolf, but unlike any wolf he had ever seen. It was huge, the size of a small horse. Its fur was a deep blue-black that seemed to absorb the light. Patterns of bioluminescent spots ran down its sides, pulsing gently. It had 6 legs, moving with impossible grace for something so large. The creature looked directly at Tai-1. Its eyes held an intelligence that made him shiver. This wasn't just an animal. These beings were something more. More of them emerged from the forest. They moved like shadows made solid, their glowing markings creating beautiful patterns as they walked. Each one was slightly different. Some had swirling spots, others had straight lines, but all of them glowed. Tai-1 knew he should be terrified. He was injured and alone, surrounded by alien predators. But his scientific mind was fascinated. These creatures were amazing. They were exactly the kind of discovery he had dreamed of making. If only he was going to live long enough to tell anyone about them. The largest of the wolf creatures stepped forward. Its fur was almost white, with markings that glowed like moonlight. Tai-1 decided to call it Ghost. The name seemed right for a creature that moved so silently through the shadows. Ghost tilted its head, studying Tai-1 with those intelligent eyes. The other wolves stayed in their circle, their lights pulsing in patterns that seemed meaningful. Tai-1 wished he had a way to record these light signals. They had to be some form of communication. His injured leg gave out, and he slid down the side of the pod. He expected the wolves to attack at this sign of weakness. Instead, Ghost made a soft chirping sound, unlike anything Tai-1 had heard before. The other wolves responded with similar sounds, creating an eerie melody. Then something extraordinary happened. Ghost picked up a fallen branch in its mouth and drew a line in the dirt. The movement was deliberate, controlled. Taiwan stared in amazement. Tool use was a sign of high intelligence. "You're trying to tell me something," Taiwan said quietly. He didn't expect the wolves to understand his words, but he hoped his calm tone would help. Ghost drew another line, crossing the first, then another and another. Taiwan realized with shock that the wolf was drawing a simple map. He could recognize the mountain range where he had crashed, marked by parallel lines. A smaller wolf with spiral patterns stepped forward. It carried something in its mouth, a piece of metal. With a start, Taiwan recognized it as part of his pod's wing, the piece that had broken off during the crash. The wolf placed it carefully on Ghost's map, right where the crash site would be. "This is impossible," Taiwan whispered. These weren't just intelligent animals. They were solving problems, communicating complex ideas, working together in ways that showed clear planning. Ghost made another chirping sound, and 3 of the wolves disappeared into the forest. They moved so quickly and quietly that they seemed to vanish like smoke. The remaining wolves sat down, their lights dimming to a soft glow. They seemed to be waiting for something. Taiwan's scientific mind raced with questions. How had these creatures evolved? What was the purpose of their bioluminescence? How complex was their society? But an equally important question was, what did they want with him? He got his answer a few minutes later when the 3 wolves returned. Each carried something different. One had fresh fruit that looked similar to berries. Another had what appeared to be clean water in a large leaf. And the third had soft moss that could serve as bandages. They placed these items near Taiwan, then backed away. The message was clear. They were offering help. Ghost walked forward and gently pushed the berries closer to Taiwan with its nose. The wolf's eyes met his, and in that moment, Taiwan understood something important. These creatures hadn't surrounded him to hunt him. They had found an injured being and were trying to help. Taiwan's scanner showed the berries were safe to eat. His hand shook as he picked one up. The wolves watched with interest as he took a small bite. The fruit was sweet and refreshing. "Thank you," he said, looking at Ghost. The wolf's markings pulsed once, brightly, like a flash of starlight. The other wolves began to make soft, musical sounds again, their lights dancing in complex patterns. As the sun set through the violet leaves above, Taiwan found himself sharing a meal with creatures that should have been his predators, but had chosen to be his protectors instead. He had come to this planet expecting to die alone. Instead, he had made first contact with a species that might change everything humanity thought they knew about alien intelligence. As darkness fell, Taiwan heard a new sound coming through the trees. The wolves' ears turned toward it, but they didn't seem alarmed. Ghost stood up and made a series of chirping sounds that echoed through the forest. A voice called out in response. A human voice. "We see them." They found another one. Taiwan thought he must be dreaming. He had been awake too long, or maybe he had hit his head harder than he thought during the crash. But the wolves were moving aside, creating a path through their circle. 3 people walked into the clearing. They wore research uniforms similar to his own, but with different patches on their shoulders. A woman led the group, carrying a device that glowed with the same blue-white light as the wolves' markings. "Hello there," she said, walking toward him carefully. "I'm Dr. Jai-Yun Song. You're safe now." She knelt beside him and examined his injured leg. "You're very lucky. The luminous ones found you quickly." "The luminous ones." Taiwan looked at Ghost and the other wolves. "That's what you call them." Jai-Yun nodded. It seemed fitting, given their beautiful markings. They're remarkable beings. We've been studying them for the past 3 years at our research station. She smiled at his surprised expression. "Yes, there's a human outpost on this planet. We keep it secret to protect the luminous ones and to study them properly." One of the other researchers, a tall man with kind eyes, stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Han Sol Kim. We picked up your pod's emergency signal yesterday, but the crash site was in Luminous One's territory. We knew they would find you before we could. You knew they would help me. Todd 1 asked, still trying to understand. The third researcher, a young man who introduced himself as Namju Lee, explained while checking Todd 1's vital signs. They help any injured creature they find. It's part of their nature. They're not just intelligent. They're compassionate. They understand suffering and try to prevent it. Ghost walked over to Jai Yun and made a series of complex light patterns along its sides. Jai Yun held up her glowing device in response, creating similar patterns. They were communicating. They're telling me about your crash, Jai Yun said. They saw your pod come down and organized search parties to find you. They've been protecting you from the forest's more dangerous creatures while waiting for us to arrive. Todd 1 watched in amazement as Jai Yun continued to communicate with Ghost using light signals. You've learned their language. Parts of it, she said. It's complex. They use a combination of light patterns, sounds, and body movements. We're still learning new things every day. That's why we keep this outpost secret. We want to understand them properly, without interference. Hansol helped Taiwan stand up. We'll take you to our facility, Haven Base. It's not far. The Luminous Ones will escort us. They always do. As if understanding, the wolves formed a protective circle around the group. Ghost took the lead, while other wolves brought up the rear. Their glowing markings lit the path through the darkening forest. What will happen to me now? Taiwan asked as they walked. That depends, Jai Yun said. We could arrange transport back to Earth if you want. Or Chi smiled. You're a xenobiologist, aren't you? We could always use another researcher here. The Luminous Ones seem to like you, and that's not something we take lightly. Taiwan looked at Ghost, walking ahead with graceful steps, then at the other wolves guarding their journey. He thought about all the questions he had, all the mysteries these creatures presented. His crash might have seemed like bad luck, but now it felt like destiny. I think, he said slowly, I'd like to stay. Haven Base surprised Taiwan. He had expected a small camp, but this was a proper research facility built into the side of a hill. The entrance was hidden behind thick vines with purple leaves. The wolves led them straight to it, showing they knew exactly where they were going. Inside, bright lights showed clean white walls and modern equipment. The main room was filled with screens showing different parts of the forest. Taiwan saw more of the wolf-like Luminous Ones on these screens, going about their daily activities. Welcome to Haven Base, Jai Yun said, leading him to the medical bay. Let's take care of that leg properly. As Namju cleaned and bandaged his injury, Taiwan looked around the room. The walls were covered with pictures of the Luminous Ones. Each image showed different light patterns they made. Under each picture were notes about what the patterns meant. How did you find them? Taiwan asked. Hansol sat down nearby and smiled. Actually, they found us. 3 years ago, our first research team crashed here, just like you did. The Luminous Ones helped them too. When the team realized how special these creatures were, they decided to stay and study them. The company that owned their ship agreed to keep this place secret, Jai Yun added. They built this base for us. Only a few people on Earth know about it. We want to protect the Luminous Ones from people who might try to harm them or use them. Namju finished wrapping Taiwan's leg. There, that should heal well now. You were lucky. The Luminous Ones kept your wound clean with the moss they brought. They know which plants have healing properties. A soft chime sounded through the base. On one of the screens, Ghost and several other wolves had appeared outside the entrance. They carried more fruit and what looked like medicinal plants. They bring us supplies every day, Jai Yun explained. We never asked them to. They just started doing it. They seem to understand that we need food and medicine, just like they do. Hansol went to collect the supplies. Through the screen, Tadwan watched him use a light-making device to thank the wolves. Their markings glowed in response, creating beautiful patterns that filled the dark forest with soft light. "Would you like to see our research?" Jiayun asked. She led Taiwan to a room filled with computers and scientific equipment. "We've learned so much about them, but there's still more to discover." She showed him their findings. The luminous ones had a complex society. They lived in family groups but worked together across different packs. They used their light patterns to share information about food, weather, and possible dangers. They even taught their young ones about useful plants and how to help other creatures. "But the most amazing thing," Jiayun said, pulling up a new set of images, "is how they think about the future. Look at these." The pictures showed the wolves planting seeds and tending to young trees. They were growing their own food and medicine. They weren't just surviving, they were farming. "They're not just intelligent," Tadwan said, understanding now. "They're building a civilization." "Yes," Jiayun agreed. "And they've decided to share it with us. Every day, they teach us something new. We think they're trying to prepare us for something, but we don't know what yet." Outside the window, the forest glowed with moving lights as more luminous ones passed by. Taiwan watched them, knowing his life had changed forever. He wasn't just going to study these amazing creatures. He was going to learn from them. A week passed at Haven Base. Taiwan's leg was healing well, and he spent every day learning about the luminous ones. Each morning, he joined the research team as they studied the wolves' behavior and tried to understand their complex language of lights and sounds. Today was different. Ghost had arrived at sunrise, making unusual patterns with its lights. The wolf seemed excited about something. "It wants us to follow," Jiayun said, reading the light signals. She grabbed her recording equipment quickly. "This is new behavior." Taiwan walked with the team as Ghost led them through the forest. Other luminous ones joined them along the way, their markings glowing even in the morning light. After 20 minutes, they reached a clearing Taiwan hadn't seen before. What he saw there made him stop in amazement. Dozens of luminous ones were gathered around a large, flat area of ground. They had cleared away all the plants and smoothed the soil. In this natural workspace, several wolves were using sticks to draw it in the dirt. "Are they making maps?" Namju asked, watching closely. "More than maps," Hansol said quietly. "Look at the patterns." The wolves were drawing circles and lines that looked like the solar system. One wolf used its paw to draw a star in the center. Around it, others added planets. They marked the world they were on with a special pattern of dots, the same pattern the wolves used in their light signals to mean home. "They're showing us they understand astronomy," Jiayun said, her voice filled with wonder. "They know their place in space." Ghost walked to the edge of the drawing and made a new mark, a simple picture of a crashed ship. Then it looked directly at Taiwan. "They knew what my ship was," Taiwan realized. "When they found me, they already understood I came from another world." "That's why they weren't afraid," Namju said. "They've been watching the sky. They were waiting for contact with other intelligent life." As they watched, more wolves came forward. Each one added something to the drawing. Pictures of plants, animals, and weather patterns. They were creating a detailed record of their world. "Look at how they work together," Jiayun said, filming everything. "Each one adds its own knowledge, but it all fits into a larger picture. This isn't just communication, it's teaching." Ghost made a soft chirping sound, and the other wolves stepped back. In the center of their drawing, Ghost carefully drew a new shape, a simple picture of a human hand meeting a wolf's paw. "A sign of partnership," Hansol said. "They're not just showing us their knowledge. They're offering to share it." Taiwan thought about how far these creatures had come. They had developed their own science, their own way of recording information, their own understanding of the universe. And instead of being afraid of humans, they had chosen to help them. "We've been thinking about this all wrong," he said. "We came here to study them, but they've been studying us too." Every time they bring us food or medicine, every time they protect us or show us something new, they're learning about us while teaching us about them. Jai-yun nodded. They're not just subjects of our research. They're fellow scientists, exploring the universe in their own way. And now they want to explore it with us. The sun rose higher, shining on the wolves' artwork in the dirt. Humans and luminous ones stood together, two intelligent species sharing knowledge across the stars. It was everything Taiwan had dreamed of finding when he became a xenobiologist. Not just alien life, but alien wisdom. 2 weeks after the drawing lesson in the clearing, Taiwan made an important discovery. He was reviewing the recordings of the luminous one's light patterns when he noticed something interesting. The wolves didn't just use their lights to talk. They used them to tell stories. Jai-yun, look at this, he called out, pointing to his screen. The patterns repeat, but they change slightly each time, like variations on a theme. Jai-yun watched the recordings carefully. You're right. It's like music. Each pattern is a verse, and together they make a complete song. They brought their findings to Hansol and Namju. The team spent hours studying the light patterns, breaking them down into smaller parts. They discovered that the wolves used different rhythms for different types of messages. Quick flashes for danger, Namju said, making notes. Slow, flowing patterns for teaching. And these spinning lights, they used those for stories about the past. Taiwan worked with the team to create a new communication device. It could copy the wolves' light patterns exactly, including the rhythms and movements. They called it the bridge because it would help connect their two species. One morning, Ghost and its pack arrived at Haven Base. Taiwan went outside with the bridge device. His hand shook slightly as he turned it on. The device created a pattern of lights that told a simple story. Human friends thank wolf teachers for sharing knowledge. Ghost watched the lights carefully. For a moment, everything was silent. Then Ghost's markings began to glow. The pattern matched Taiwan's exactly, but added new elements. The wolf was correcting their grammar. It worked, Jai-yun said excitedly. They understand what we're trying to do, and they're helping us do it better. Over the next few days, the luminous ones spent more time at the base than ever before. They took turns teaching the humans the correct way to make each light pattern. They were patient teachers, repeating patterns until the humans got them right. They're not just teaching us their language, Hansol said one evening. They're teaching us their history. He was right. Through the light patterns, the wolves told stories about their past. They showed how they had learned to grow food, heal the sick, and work together. They explained how they had watched the stars and learned about the universe. But the most important story came from Ghost. Using carefully crafted patterns of light, the wolf explained why the luminous ones had chosen to help humans. They believe that knowledge should be shared. Jai-yun translated, her voice full of emotion. They think that different kinds of intelligence should work together, not apart. When they saw my team crash here 3 years ago, they saw a chance to prove that different species could help each other grow. Taiwan thought about his own crash, about how scared he had been when the wolves found him. Now he understood that moment differently. The luminous ones hadn't just been helping an injured creature. They had been reaching out to another intelligent species, offering friendship and knowledge. We're not just learning their language, Taiwan said. We're learning their wisdom. They want to show us a better way of exploring the universe, not through competition, but through cooperation. Outside the base, more wolves gathered. Their lights created patterns that looked like stars and planets, telling stories about the worlds they hoped to explore together with their human friends. The forest glowed with the promise of a future where different species could learn from each other and grow together. 6 months after Taiwan's crash, Haven Base prepared for an important day. Earth's diplomatic team was arriving to meet the luminous ones officially. Jai-yun and her team had finally convinced the authorities that these remarkable creatures were ready for formal contact. The morning sun painted the sky pink as 3 ships landed in the clearing near the base. Ghost and the other wolves watched calmly, their markings glowing with welcoming patterns. They had helped prepare for this moment, teaching the humans exactly how to introduce their leaders. Remember, Jai-yun told the diplomatic team as they stepped out of their ships, let them make the first move. They have a special greeting ceremony. The head diplomat, wearing her formal uniform, stood quietly as Ghost approached. The large wolf's fur shimmered in the morning light, its markings creating beautiful patterns that told the story of first contact with humans. Tae-won stood with the research team, operating the bridge device. He translated Ghost's light patterns for everyone to understand. We welcome those who come in peace to learn and share wisdom. The diplomat's eyes widened as she watched the wolf communicate. Even after reading all the reports, she hadn't been fully prepared for how intelligent and graceful these creatures were. Ghost led the group to the clearing where the wolves had first drawn their star maps. Now the ground showed new drawings, pictures of humans and wolves working together, sharing knowledge and exploring the universe. It was the Luminous One's vision of the future. They want to propose something. Tae-won translated as Ghost created complex patterns of light. They're offering to help us understand this sector of space. They'd been watching the stars for generations. They know about planets we haven't discovered yet. The diplomat stepped forward. How can we communicate our response? Jai-yun handed her a small bridge device. Just press this button. The device will create the correct pattern of lights to say, we accept your offer of friendship and knowledge. As the diplomat activated the device, all the luminous ones in the clearing lit up their markings at once. The forest glowed like a field of stars. The wolves were signing their own version of a celebration song. What happens now? The diplomat asked, amazed by the display. Now we learn from each other, Hansol explained. The luminous ones want to share everything they know about this part of space. In return, they want to learn about Earth and human science. They believe that different kinds of wisdom make the universe richer. Namju added, they've already taught us so much about their medicine and farming. Imagine what else we could learn from each other. As the diplomatic team began their formal discussions with the wolves, Tae-won walked to the edge of the clearing. He remembered how afraid he had been when he first crashed on this planet. Now he understood that his crash wasn't an accident. It was an opportunity. The universe had brought two intelligent species together in exactly the right way. Ghost joined him, its markings glowing softly. The wolf created a pattern that Tae-won now understood well. The stars are many, but wisdom is one. Together, we will learn more than we ever could alone. The morning sun rose higher, shining on humans and wolves standing together. In this clearing on a distant planet, a new chapter in the story of intelligent life had begun. The luminous ones had shown that the greatest discoveries come not from fear, but from trust. Not from competition, but from cooperation. Tae-won looked up at the twin moons of this world that had become his home. Somewhere out there, other intelligent species were waiting to be found. And when humanity found them, they would remember the lesson of the luminous ones, that the best way to explore the universe is together.